I want to talk this morning simply about this: maximize your moment. Maximize your moment. I remember a statement that an old man who now sleeps with the saints in glory once made to me. It was during a time in my life when I was facing a major decision and I didn't quite know what I should do. It was as if I was standing at a crossroad, wondering which path to take. And the old man said to me, and I shall never forget it, he said, "Opportunities come, opportunities go, and they come no more." Such a simple statement, isn't it? No big words, no high-powered speech, no erudition of language. It's simple, short, succinct, and to the point. Opportunities come, opportunities go, and they come no more. He didn't tell me what I should do. No, he didn't try to make my decision for me. But his simple statement forced me to think afresh about the importance of time and of the necessity to make the best of my decisions. His statement was reminding me that time is a continuum. It's ever moving, ever changing, ever flowing. It waits on no one. It doesn't discriminate between race, class, or creed, because it's continuously moving, continuously advancing and changing, and couched within the moments of time are human opportunities, which like time do not wait, do not linger, do not hesitate, because opportunities come, opportunities go, and they come no more. Perhaps the late Benjamin Elijah Mays captures the essence of what I'm trying to say. He said, "I've only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it, forced upon me, I can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give an account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it." How right he was. That eternity is potentially condensed and concentrated inside of a minute. How often in life we pay attention to the longer segments of time in our lives, and those longer segments of time that we often pay attention to often involves weeks or years or months of planning. We plan, if you will, for months, or rather for years, which college we're going to attend. We plan for months on where we're going to spend our vacation. And we plan for decades when we're going to retire. And all of that's good and all of that's necessary. But the real action and excitement in life is not in how we handle our years, our months, our weeks, our days, our hours. No, the real excitement and action in life is how we handle our minutes. Because one decision at any given moment in our lives can change our lives for the good, for the good or the bad. And so if you're going to get the most out of life, I want to encourage you today as a congregation and as individuals to maximize your moments. Interestingly, we learned this lesson from a most unlikely man in our text today. His name is Bartimaeus. A blind man, Mark tells us, and he was sitting by the roadside doing what he had grown accustomed to doing, and that is begging the passers-by to put a little money in his cup. Good for Bartimaeus that day that he would have the experience of a lifetime. And the reason it happened is because he had the courage to maximize his moment. How ironic it is that a man who couldn't see teaches us a valuable lesson about how to look at life and how to get the most out of life by maximizing our moments. I submit to you today that if you're going to maximize your moment, first of all, this text teaches us that you need to recognize your opportunity. Can the church say recognize your opportunity? Jesus was moving with a sense of purpose and dispatch. His eyes were fixed on his inevitable fate in Jerusalem. And as he was walking toward Jerusalem, he went through a city called Jericho. Jericho was about 17 miles from Jerusalem. And as he walked toward Jerusalem, he was surrounded by a large crowd of people who made up of pupils, learners, mentees, if you will. It was a common way for rabbis to teach. They would walk and teach. And so Jesus is in that setting, and Bartimaeus was in that setting where Jesus is walking and he's teaching at the same time. Good for Bartimaeus that Bartimaeus was sitting by the roadside that day, because he came within hearing distance of Jesus' voice. I submit to you that Bartimaeus was in the right place at the right time. I submit to you, friends, that if you're going to recognize your opportunity, know that it has something to do with location and timing. That Bartimaeus was sitting at that particular place at that particular time, and Jesus just happens to come by, and he's within hearing distance of his voice. May I remind you today, friends, that you can't always plan or a great opportunity. No, you can't always schedule them. Sometimes they come unplanned, unannounced, unrehearsed. They just show up, if you will. And if you're going to get the most out of life, like Bartimaeus, you've got to be in God's right place at God's right time. You see, you can't plan great moments. They just happen. It happened to Moses when one day he was keeping watch of his father-in-law's sheep on the backside of a mountain, when he saw a strange phenomenon. He saw a bush burning that was not being consumed. He went in for a closer investigation of the bush, and a voice spoke to him and said, "Go tell Pharaoh to let my people go," and the rest is history. It happened to David when he was watching over his father's sheep, and a courier showed up from Jesse's house and said that the prophet Samuel wants to have a word with you, and the rest is history. It happened to Simon Peter when one day he was keeping watch of his father while he was fishing on the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus showed up and said, "Drop your nets and I'll make you a fisher of men," and the rest is history. It happened to Saul of Tarsus when one day he was on his way to arrest the church, but on his way he got pulled over by the high sheriff of heaven. A light shone so brightly that it knocked him to the ground, and a voice spoke to him and said, "I'm Jesus who you persecute," and the rest is history. You see, you can't always plan or schedule a great opportunity. They just come unscheduled, unannounced. And if you're going to get the most out of life, you got to learn to be in God's right place at God's right time. Let me put it like this. Boom Boom, that's what we call Steve. He played football. And in football, there's a play called a timing play, where the quarterback gets the ball, drops back 5 yards, wide receiver runs down 15 yards, turns right, goes 5 yards, turns around, and catches the ball. But in a timing play, when the quarterback is dropping back and the wide receiver is running down the field, before he even turns, the ball is already on the way. And so the quarterback is really not throwing the ball to the man, but he's throwing it to a spot. And if he's going to catch his blessing, he's got to be in God's right place at God's right time. Can I tell you today that God is a quarterback? And the things that you've been believing God for are already on the way. The blessing is on the way. The answer is on the way. But you've got to be in God's right place at God's right time. Recognizing your opportunity means that it has something to do with location and timing. But recognizing your opportunity means that it requires a willingness to take risks. Bible says in verse 47, he said, and when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, Luke's gospel gives us a little more detail. Luke's gospel tells us that Bartimaeus began to inquire, what's all this noise I hear? What's with all these people? What's all this racket that I hear in the background? And somebody in the crowd said, it's Jesus of Nazareth, and he's passing by. Now, good for Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus realized that here is the only man in the world that can help me with my condition, and he's within hearing distance of my voice. I don't have a day to get his attention. I don't have an hour to get his attention. All I have is this one moment in time. And so he began to cry out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Notice he calls him by his messianic title, Son of David, because Jesus, Yeshua, was a common word name in that time. And Bartimaeus said, no, this is not some common Jesus. This is one who is the Son of David, who is the rightful heir to the eternal throne of David. And I don't have an hour to get his attention. All I have is this one moment. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. A blind man had more spiritual insight than the sighted crowd. Now, Bartimaeus was willing to take a risk. What was the risk? The risk was that Jesus could have ignored him. And had Jesus ignored him, he would have been the laughing stock of the village. But Bartimaeus says, well, he might not hear me. He may ignore me. And I might be the laughing stock of the village, but this is a risk that I'm willing to take because he's the only person that can help me. I don't have a day. I don't have an hour. All I have is this one kairotic moment in time. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. How many plans never came to fruition because we were not willing to take a risk? How many businesses never got started because you're too afraid to take a risk? How many relationships never got started? You know, when you tell somebody I love you, you're taking a risk. The risk is that they may not love you back. And 2 years ago, these brave Oreo pastors were willing to take a risk. Next time you read Hebrews 11, wherever it says faith, put risk there. Now, risk is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. By risk, Noah built the ark. By risk, Abraham left his family. But you know what holds some of us, keeps some of us moored to the shallow waters of life is what I call the tyranny of indecisiveness. You just won't pull the trigger. You keep talking yourself out of what you know you should do because you want to practice a safe faith. You want God to give you a pre-flight itinerary of how everything's going to go. You want to make sure that there are no bumps down the road and everything is going to go smoothly. But friends, if you're going to do something like this that we're sitting in today, you've got to be willing to take a risk. I submit to you today that this text is tailored for this occasion and tailored to this church and perhaps tailored for someone individually today that needs to stop being so indecisive and learn to take some risks. You see, we fear that if we try, we will fail. But failure is not when you try but fail, but failure is when you fail to try. But lest I keep you too long, there's a second movement in this passage that if you're going to maximize your moment, not only must you recognize your opportunity, but secondly, you got to ignore your opposition. Oh yeah, whenever you have a God-sized goal and a God-sized dream, you're going to face some opposition. Are you with me today? And the reason you've got to ignore your opposition, watch this, is because people will always criticize a radical idea. So the folk in the crowd said to him, "Man, hush. Stop making all that noise and all that racket. We're trying to hear what the master has to say. Hush your mouth. We don't want to hear you. We want to hear Jesus." In other words, get these radical ideas out of your mind, thinking that you're going to receive your sight. He'll never help you. You're just a poor, blind beggar. So hush your mouth. But the more they told Bartimaeus to hush, Mark says, the louder he got. "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." He says, all of you that's telling me to be quiet can see. But here's the only person in the world that can help me. "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." They said, "Listen, we're embarrassed by you. You know, we're trying to have a dignified affair here. And here you are doing all that shouting and all that hollering. Man, why don't you dignify yourself?" Bartimaeus says, "I know you're concerned about dignity, but I'm concerned about getting the attention of deity. And here's the only person that can help me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Look at this. A man is crying out for mercy, and the folk want him to hush. These must have been church folk. They had to be. Bartimaeus says, "I need mercy, man. I need mercy so I can receive my sight. I need mercy so I can improve my lifestyle. I need his mercy." And so at the top of his voice, he keeps crying out, "Have mercy on me." May I remind you today, you got to ignore your opposition, because people will always criticize a radical idea. And we today are sitting in the midst of a radical idea. To see what God is doing here in Little Rock. I'm from here. I know history here. This is a radical idea. And not everybody is happy with what you're doing. But you got to ignore your opposition, because people will always criticize a radical idea. But I submit to you, ignore your opposition, because God can turn your critics into your cheerleaders. The text says that Bartimaeus' faith caused Jesus to stop in his track and said, "Bring that man here." Look at this. A blind man has more faith than the people in the crowd that can see. And notice how their voices change, how they speak to Bartimaeus once they realize he got Jesus' attention. In verse 48, they said, "Man, hush your mouth. We're trying to hear Jesus." When he got Jesus' attention and they saw he was successful, they said, "Rise, he's calling you. Be of good cheer." The devil is a liar. People will criticize your radical idea until they see it begin to work, and then they will say, "Man, I was with you all the time." But ignore your opposition, because the Lord can turn your critics into your cheerleaders. We spend too much time and give too much attention to our critics. When you got hundreds and hundreds of people who are supportive, as pastors, we sometimes spend too much time and give too much attention and focus on critics. Can I teach you a lesson? Can I give you something free this morning? It is this, that if you're walking down the street and someone is throwing rocks at you, The worst thing you can do is stop and deal with the rock throwers. Because if you stop to deal with your rock throwers, they're going to keep hitting you over and over again. Free advice. If you're walking down the street and somebody's throwing rocks at you, don't stop to deal with your rock throwers. Just keep walking. Because if you walk long enough and far enough, you'll soon be out of their range. Well, here it is. Here it is. One last movement and I'm in my seat. Thank you, Bishop, for inviting me to come over. Thank you, Josh, for having me today. If you're going to maximize your moment, recognize your opportunity, ignore your opposition, but then participate in your outcome. Yeah, Jesus was ultimately the person who performed the miracle, but there was a part that Bartimaeus had to play. See, you know, that's a lesson in itself, because we pray and we want God to just drop blessings out of the sky. Sometimes we have to participate in the answer. So I put it like this. Yes, pray for a job and fill out an application. Pray for healing and change your diet and go see your doctor. Single person, pray for a husband or a wife and go get a job. Because it does take more than love to pay your bills. If you are broke, ain't nobody in the house gonna be happy. You got to participate in your outcome. Well, what does that look like? First of all, remove anything that hinders you. Verse 50 says, and throwing aside his garment, he arose and came to Jesus. He said, listen, here is the only person in the world that can give me my sight back. And he's within hearing distance of my voice. I don't have a week to get his attention. I don't have a day. I don't even have an hour. All I have is this one moment in time. But this outer garment is encumbersome. It's slowing me down. So he says, I'm throwing aside, because I need to get to Jesus as soon as I can. Can I tell you today, friends, that if you're going to maximize your moment, you got to be willing to remove things out of your life that will hinder you. Sometimes it's relationships. You know, there are just some people, it's not that you are better than them or they are not as good as you, but there are just some people who can't go where you're going. If he or she is not adding any value to your life, you don't need them in your life. Single Christian, you need to ask God for the spiritual gift of goodbye. Because they're a drag on your life. Some people can't go where you're going. Sometimes you got to get rid of habits, sinful inclinations. Hebrews 11. Lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily ensnares you. You know, that one. Now, everybody's got a that one. Now, my that one may not be your that one, and your that one may not be my that one, but you got a that one, and I've got a that one. You know that one that the devil doesn't have to work very hard to get you. You got to remove fears, because fear will keep you moored to the harbor of shallow thinking in shallow waters. You got to be willing to remove anything that hinders you. But wait a minute. If you're going to participate in your outcome, you've got to make a specific request. So Jesus said to the man, he said, what do you want me to do for you? And Bartimaeus said, Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. Now, Bartimaeus had two problems. He was blind and he was broke because he was begging. But when Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? He didn't say, Lord, I want to receive my sight and I want you to give me some money. He said, no, Lord, I want to see, because if you give me my sight, I'll make my own money. He didn't spend his time praying for secondary stuff. He knew what he really needed. Come here, let me ask you a question. Do you know what you really need? You asking God to bless you with more money, but what you really need is more discipline with how you spend your money. Do you know what you really need? You asking God for healing, but what you really need is a change in diet. I mean, if you're diabetic and you eating a dozen donuts every day and 5 sugary sodas, and then talking about the God took me. No, God didn't take you. You took yourself. Do you know what you really need? You're asking God for promotion. I'm tired of this job. I'm tired of it. But what you really need is to learn to be grateful that you have a job. But there's one last thing, and I'm in my seat. If you're going to participate in your outcome, not only must you remove anything that hinders you and make a specific request, but you need to respond with gratitude. We see it in that last verse, that Jesus healed him immediately. He received his sight. But Bartimaeus didn't just get his blessing and then run off and have nothing else to do with the Lord. The Bible says he followed Jesus on the road. Those are the actions, I believe, of a thankful heart. That's the actions of a grateful heart. That this man has given me and what only he could give me. He's done for me what only he could do for me. And I would be an ingrate to receive God's blessings and then try to live independently of him. You know, that's really somebody's story this morning. The more God blesses some of us, the less we feel like we need God. The more money some of us make, the less we feel like we need to pray and go to church. I don't know, what is it about affluence and a lack of a healthy acknowledgement of God? But you know, friends, there are some situations in life where your money cannot help you. Amen. Money can buy a lot of things. Money can buy a watch, but it can't buy time. Money can buy a house, but it can't buy a home. Money can buy silk sheets and satin pillows, but it can't buy a good night's sleep. And there are some things in life that you and I will face that the only way we're going to get through it, we got to have a close relationship with the Lord. So the question that I want to raise is, the Lord is asking me to ask you is, how high can I lift you without losing you? How much can I bless you with? And you understand how to respond to me like Bartimaeus. And said, this man has done for me what nobody else could do. And my response is going to be a grateful response, a thankful response. I'm going to follow Jesus on the road.